Hello, in this episode of Exploring Rust, I'm going to take a look at vectors. I've read through one page of the documentation or skimmed through it, and it looks pretty straightforward. I've got it open here next to me, so I'm just going to go ahead and try it out. Let's start by creating a new empty vector. So I'm going to say let's call this animals, and since it's going to be empty, I need to say what type of thing is going to be in it. Vectors can only store one type of thing. So that's going to be of type vec, and in diamond brackets we specify the kind of thing we want to put in it. The documentation has an example with integers. I wonder if I could use a reference to an immutable string and put that in there. Let's try it. I'm going to set that equal to vec, and we call some kind of function attached to vec called new, like this, and that ought to work. I also don't know if it's possible to print this. Let's have a go. So, double quotes, curly brackets. Let's put animals in there, and I presume I could do it perhaps with a question mark. It's going to be empty, of course, but let's see if this does anything. So I'll do cargo format just to be sure it's formatted well, and cargo run. Okay, actually we got something, so that's nice. I've got a pair of empty square brackets there. Now, obviously I want to see if I can actually add strings to this. My hope is that by using a kind of string reference here, I can just add text to it in double quotes. Someone actually mentioned something like this in a comment on YouTube or on my blog, so thanks to whoever that was. But I'm not sure if it's going to work in this context. I've got to make this mutable, of course, and then maybe I can add strings to this with the push method. Let's say animals.push. And what I'd really like to be able to do is stuff like this. Let's add cat as well. If this works, I'll be absolutely delighted. Let's go to a terminal. So I'm going to run it. I'm actually almost nervous now. Oh, wow, look at that. It actually does work. No more string from for me. Okay, so that's great. That's pretty straightforward. Now, if you want to create a vector with items already in it, that looks a bit simpler. So I can say let's call it let fruits equal vec, and this is a macro like print line. Still don't know what a macro is though. And then we have square brackets, which I suppose makes sense. And then let's try putting apple and banana, and we'll have a cherry. And maybe I can print that. So I'll duplicate this, move it down, and change this to fruits. Okay, so let's give this a go. Oh, that works as well. Great. Okay, this is pretty good. I'm really pleased with this string thing. I really hated typing string.from every time I wanted a string. And here I really do want immutable strings, so why would I use string : from? So I've got a couple of vectors here, and now the question is, how do I read values from these vectors? And since it's Rust, there's going to be complications, obviously. Let's just maybe make this a bit smaller. So one way I should be able to do it is if I say I'll call this animal, and it looks like we can get references to the items in the vector. So the items are still going to stay in the vector, of course. I'm just going to try to get a reference to one of the items. So this is going to be of type, I should think, reference to a str. And I can set that equal to, and apparently I need a reference here as well, animals, square brackets, and I can use like an array subscript here. How many animals did I put in there? 2. I should be able to get the one at 1, which should be cat. And then we should be able to print that. So I'm going to move this down and put animal here. Probably I don't need this. Let's try it without. So in the documentation, it's using ints, and the type it puts here is just i32. So there's no reference there. I'm half wondering if what I'm going to get out is like a reference to a reference, but I'll just try this and see if it works. So that actually works. It says cat down there, which is great. There is another way to get items out of a vector, just in case this way is not complicated enough for your tastes. So I'll just redeclare animal again to save me thinking up a new variable name. And this time what we're going to get back is a option, which I assume must contain references to strings. Of course this type is presumably optional and this, but I'm entering it so that I'm more sure about what type of thing I'm actually getting. And now I can use the get method. So animal.get, and I want to get which animal? Well, I got the animal at index 1. Let's get the one at index 0. So when we get this, it's going to come back as an option. And apparently the point of this is that if you ask for something that doesn't exist in the vector, your program's not just going to bomb out with an error message. We better try that actually. But first let's try something that actually works. So in the documentation it uses a match to get the value out of the option, but we should be able to do it with if let. So let's say maybe let dog equal. Can I remember if let is the question? So if let, and we need something that matches this option. So I suppose option, round brackets, and what am I going to call this now? Let's just call it value. And I think I set that equal to the thing I want to inspect, which would be animal. And what comes next? I think curly brackets. And so I want to return animal if that works. Else I want to return, let's just put unknown or something like that, or invalid or something. Should be a semicolon there, I believe. And then let's try to print this animal. So I'm going to put dog in here. Let's try that. Clear the screen. Maybe run cargo format for good measure. And cargo run. Okay, it didn't like that. Oh yeah, when you type if let, you don't try to match the whole option, but one of its variants, like sum. So I got this bit wrong here. What should I type instead? Oh, well, this is just a normal option, enum, right? So what I actually want to match is sum here. Okay, let's try this then. It's weird that last time I did cargo format with this, it put all of this in one line. Maybe because I mistyped there. Let's try cargo format again. And I'll just clear the screen and do cargo run. String indices are ranges of U size. The type str cannot be indexed by integer. Well, clearly I've got a problem here because I've no idea what this error message is talking about, quite honestly. I wonder if I just have some type that's incorrect in here. Like, should I have more reference symbols somewhere? So I've got a reference symbol there. Oh, I just type animal instead of animals. Oh, okay, right. Okay, let's go back and try that again. Well, that looks a bit cleaner, to be honest, but still not working. Mismatched types. Expected option str found option two reference symbols to a str. Okay, I really don't know what to do. Is it possible that I just don't need that? I could also just try missing this off because it should be able to infer the type. It doesn't like that. That doesn't seem to help. So I think what I'll do is just maybe miss that off and see if that helps. Let's try that. Well, that actually worked. I honestly didn't expect it to. So it says dog down there now. So this is valid code now. And when I do cargo format, it does leave it like this. I don't know why previously when I did this, it put it all on one line. And now it doesn't like that. I don't know why not. Maybe I've just exceeded some line length limit with all this stuff. I don't know. Okay, so one thing I better try out is what happens when I try to request an element that's off the end of the collection. In C, that would appear to work, except you get back garbage. And if you were really unlucky, your program would fail for mysterious reasons and it would take you days to figure out what stupid thing you've done wrong. But let's change this to 2, which is off the end. So that's the one where I just access the element directly in the vector. Let's see what happens now. So yeah, it actually says index out of bounds and it says thread main panicked. So it gives me a very clear error message and it looks very straightforward. So that's pretty nice. Let's put that back and let's see what happens if I change this to 3 or something that's off the end. So now it just comes back with unknown, so we don't get an error. Program carries on running. It's just obviously not going to work. Let's change that back to 0. So that's the difference. With this one, it's going to crash with an error. And with this one, it's just going to not crash. It's going to carry on. But obviously, you won't get a value that you want out of the option because it didn't exist at that index. Now, here's something I want to try out. Apparently, if I get a reference to an item in a list and then I try to add an item to the list, that's not going to work because there's too many references going on there. There's like a mutable reference and an immutable reference. So one of these vectors is mutable, isn't it? Yeah, so animals is mutable. So let's see what I can do with that. So I've got references to things that are in that animals list. Let's see if I can push another animal to it. So animals.push, and I'll try to add in mouse. I think that will actually work. And actually it would be good to also iterate over the vector and print the animals one by one. Let's have a print line here just to create some space. And then I'm going to do for, let's say, A in animals, curly brackets, except for some reason, again, I need a reference symbol there. Not 100% sure why. And then I do print line, and I should be able to print out A. So let's try that. Maybe I'll put animal here just to make the output a bit clearer. So I'm trying to push to a vector. I previously got references to things in that vector, and then I'm iterating over the vector. Let's try that. Okay, so that actually works. But of course, my previous references to items in this vector are no longer used by the time I get to here. So what about if I try to print one of them down here somewhere so that when I do that, I've still got a reference that's in scope. Let's duplicate that. And in there, I'm going to write dog and output dog in there. So what I'm thinking is, okay, I've got this dog reference here. It's a reference to one of the animals in the animals vector. I'm using it down here. So when I do the push, this will have to get a mutable reference. This has presumably got an immutable reference, and that shouldn't be allowed. Let's try it. Okay, it worked. I don't understand why the example in the documentation doesn't seem to work with this, and my example does. Maybe it's because I'm using an option. Let's try not using an option. So I've got a push here. Wait a minute, I'm getting quite confused now. Okay, I think let's try here. Let's say let cat equal animals, and I need a ampersand in front of that, and then square brackets here, semicolon. Which one's cat? That's the item at index 1. All right, so now I'm definitely getting a reference to an object that's in the animals vector. And I want to print this down here. Let's say cat, cat. And in between printing it, so in between using this reference and obtaining the reference, I want to try to do a push into animals. Let's try that. Okay, finally I've got something that doesn't work. Good. So, yeah, I've got an immutable borrow when I get cat from animals. And when I do the push, I've got a mutable borrow, and I'm not allowed to do that because it's still in scope because of this. So if I comment out this, then I think the code will work. Let's try this. I'll do cargo format again and then run. And now it works, except I've got an unused variable warning. Okay, there's a couple more things that I want to try out here. First, I'm going to suppress the unused variable warnings with a hash, exclamation mark, square brackets, allow unused, because the last thing I need is more stuff cluttering up my error messages here. Okay, let's go to the bottom. So apparently I can modify items in a mutable vector, even while I'm iterating over them. Let's try an example of that. So I'm going to have let mute, I'll call it numbers, equal, and I'll use this vec macro to create the vector, and we'll put some numbers in there, like 1, 2, and 3. Then I want to iterate over these numbers. So for I in numbers, print ln, might as well print them out while I'm here. And in there, I think I can just put I. So let's check that works. I'll do clear, cargo format, cargo run. Yeah, so that works, that's fine. But can I actually increment these numbers in the vector? Let's have another loop. In fact, I don't really need 2 loops. What I could do is move this down, and I'll use that to print the whole vector. So let's put numbers here, colon, question mark, I think. And yeah, I don't need to pass in anything. And what I want to do in this loop is I want to increment I. And apparently I is a reference, and I need to use the star operator to dereference it if I want to change it. Let's say I maybe times equals 3, to multiply them all by 3. I have missed off some stuff here, but I just want to see if this works. Let's try it. Yeah, that doesn't work. Type integer cannot be dereferenced. But I've missed off here reference mute, which apparently makes a difference. And then I think I ought to be a reference, which we can dereference with asterisk. Let's try that. Yeah, so now it works, and I've successfully multiplied each of those values by 3. So that's pretty nice. So what else is in the documentation here? It says that dropping a vector drops all of its elements. So when the vector variable goes out of scope, all the elements are going to be cleaned up as well, which is good to know. That basically means I don't have to worry about them. And the other thing that's in the documentation on this page is it says you can use enums to store things of different types in vectors. So let's take a look at an example of that. So let's say I have an enum person, curly brackets there. Yeah, and I suppose I could use structs as well, but let's stick to enum, that's what's in the docs. So with an enum, you don't have named fields, do you? No, you do have named fields in an enum. Yeah, of course you do. Okay, so I think I could write, for example, name here, and I could say that that is of type reference to a str, maybe. I'll put a comma in there. Let's just see if that compiles. I'm not sure if I remembered this correctly. Yeah, it doesn't like that. It says expected named lifetime parameter. Okay, well, the documentation has a string in there. Let's go back to this string and see if that works or not. So does that work? If not, then I must have forgotten something about the syntax of enums. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So we should be able to have something else, like, for example, ID of type I32. I'll put a trailing comma in, which I assume is considered best practice since it is in other languages, and that ought to compile. Now let's create a vector. So I'm going to say let people equal, and I'll use the vec macro. Now in here I should be able to create a vector that contains enums of type person, and that means I ought to be able to put different types within the vector effectively, although, well, they're all of type person, but person has 2 constants of different types here. So I think I should be able to do person colon colon name, and in there I'm going to have to use string from, I imagine. So string colon colon from. Let's put in here Bob, and then for the second item in the vector, let's try putting an int in there. So person colon colon ID, and let's put 73 in there. And then I'll try just printing out this whole thing. So this is called people, and let's see if that works. Yeah, so it doesn't work. It says person cannot be formatted using colon question mark, but I think if I put this derived debug thing above my person enum, then I will be able to print it. So let's put that in and go back. Let's clear the screen and run it. Yeah, now it works. So I've got name Bob and ID 73. So that could definitely be useful. All right, so there's a lot of stuff here. I'm just going to make it small, see if I can get it all on one screen. I can't get it all on one screen. Okay. Anyway, what I'm going to do is write this up and try to put it in some kind of logical format on blog.caveofprogramming.com. So you'll be able to take a look at it there. And I'll put the source code there as well. Overall, I think this is pretty straightforward. The main thing that I'm not sure about is, was it this variable here? I just can't figure out what the type of it is, but I expect I'll figure that out later on at some point. The next section in the documentation appears to be on strings, so it's even possible that that might clear this up. But anyway, this is relatively straightforward, so it's not so bad really, I think. Okay, so do check out blog.caveofprogramming.com, and until next time, happy coding.